Welcome back to the deep dive.
It's good to be back.
So, if you're a regular listener, you probably know the drill by now. We usually take this massive stack of articles, maybe a new best-selling book.
A heap of research papers.
Right. And we distill it all down into something you can actually use. We love volume, we love the big picture, but
Today is different.
today we're doing something completely different. We're flipping the script.
We are indeed. Instead of looking at, say, 100 pages to find one insight, we're looking at practically 2 sentences to find 100 insights.
I have to admit, when I first saw the show notes for this, I was a little skeptical. I thought, okay, are we really going to talk for 40 minutes about a single paragraph?
It seems like a stretch.
It did. But then I actually sat down with the source material. I read it, then I read it again, and I realized that what we're doing today isn't just a reading, it's a crime scene investigation.
That is the perfect analogy.
Okay.
It really is a forensic analysis. We're looking at a wreckage that, let's be honest, happens to almost everyone at some point in their lives, and we're trying to figure out the cause of the crash.
The topic is burnout. But I want to be really clear right from the start. We're not talking about the I worked 80 hours this week and answered too many emails kind of burnout.
Oh, that's exhaustion. It's a different thing.
It is. We're talking about something much more specific and honestly much more tragic. We're talking about the burnout that comes from caring.
Too much.
Exactly. From caring too much. It's the burnout of high intensity.
The burnout of passion.
Yes. It's the burnout that hits the spiritual seeker, the obsessive artist, the startup founder who's, sleeping under their desk.
A person who falls madly, head over heels in love.
That's a huge one. It's what happens when your enthusiasm is actually the weapon that takes you down.
And that's the real paradox here, isn't it? The paradox of intensity. We live in this culture that is constantly screaming at us to find our passion, give 110%.
Set your soul on fire.
Yes, exactly. We worship this high-intensity state.
Oh.
And today's source material is basically a warning label for that state. It's a very polite, very philosophical way of saying, handle with extreme caution or this will destroy you.
So let's introduce the source. It's an excerpt from the work of Sri Aurobindo.
Right.
For those who might not know him, he was an Indian philosopher, a yogi, a poet. But he was also incredibly intellectual. He wrote in English, and his command of the language is just surgical.
Surgical is the right word. Aurobindo really bridges that gap between, say, Western philosophy and Eastern spirituality. He doesn't treat spirituality like it's magic. He treats it almost like physics.
Physics.
Yeah. There are laws, there are mechanics, there are causes, and there are effects.
Yeah.
And if you violate the laws of physics, well, you get hurt.
So our mission today is to unpack this text word by word. We're going to deconstruct the relationship between what he calls human material, that's us, and these high-intensity experiences, specifically something he calls perfect bhakti. And I should warn you, the listener, this text is not. It's not nice. It's not a motivational poster. It uses words like feeble, frail, and weak.
It is harsh, but it's precise. As we dive in, try not to hear it as a moral judgment. Aurobindo isn't calling you names.
Right.
Think of it more like a structural engineer looking at a bridge. If the engineer says, this bridge is too frail to hold a 10-ton truck, they aren't, insulting the bridge's feelings.
No, they're stating a fact.
They're stating a fact about its load-bearing capacity.
Load-bearing capacity. I love that. So let's walk up to this bridge and see why it's cracking. The text opens with this collision between, an immovable object and an unstoppable force. It reads, "But the weak nature is too feeble to bear the impetus of so mighty a thing as perfect bhakti."
There is so much packed into that one opening clause. It's incredible.
Let's start with the victim in this scenario, the weak nature. My initial reaction was, ouch, why weak? Why feeble? It feels like he's blaming the person for not being good enough.
I get that reaction.
Yeah.
But look closer at the word choice. He uses feeble.
Okay.
In a medical context or a structural one, what does feeble actually mean? It doesn't just mean bad.
Feeble. It
No.
implies something shaky, like a feeble pulse, or a feeble old wooden chair.
Yes,
It implies a lack of stability.
exactly. It implies a lack of constitution, a lack of structural integrity. If you have a feeble immune system, you aren't a bad person, but you have no defense. You crumble at the first sign of a virus.
Okay.
In this context, a feeble nature refers to a psychological or emotional system that isn't grounded.
So we're talking about someone who maybe lacks emotional regulation, or someone whose sense of self is a bit porous.
Yes, someone who is easily uncentered, a nervous system that fries easily, someone who can't hold their ground when the pressure changes. And the text says This nature is too feeble to bear the impetus. That word impetus. That is the key to this whole crime scene.
That stood out to me too. Impetus. It's not a word you hear in casual conversation very much. It sounds scientific.
It is. It's a physics term. It comes from Newton. It refers to the force or the energy with which a body moves. It implies momentum, velocity, mass.
So he's describing this spiritual experience as perfect bhakti, not as a feeling, but as a kinetic force.
Precisely. And this is where most of us get it wrong. We think of inspiration or devotion as this fluffy, warm cloud that just descends on us. Aurobindo is saying, no, it is a truck.
Like a truck.
It has weight, it has velocity, it has voltage.
So when we say, I want a huge spiritual breakthrough, or I want to be swept off my feet by romance, we're basically asking to be hit by a truck.
In energetic terms,
Yeah.
pretty much. You are asking for a massive surge of voltage to run through your system. And if you are feeble, if your wiring is thin, if your insulation is cracked, what happens when you push high voltage through a low voltage wire?
It melts.
Or snaps.
It burns.
It burns. And that's why he says the weak nature is too feeble to bear it. To bear something means to carry the weight of it without collapsing.
I want to clarify perfect bhakti here, because that's the specific force he mentions. We should probably define that for people who aren't, yoga scholars.
Sure. Bhakti is a Sanskrit term that's usually translated as devotion, as the path of love. But perfect bhakti, that implies the absolute highest form of that. It's an intense, all-consuming, heart-centered surrender to the divine.
So it's not just, I like this philosophy.
Oh, no. It's an avalanche of adoration. Imagine the most intense romantic infatuation you've ever felt. That butterfly feeling where you can't eat, you can't sleep, you're just obsessed.
Right.
Now multiply that feeling by 1,000 and direct it toward the universe. That's the impetus.
Okay, that clarifies things. Because usually we think of love as this purely benevolent, soft thing. But you're saying, and Aurobindo is saying, that at a high enough intensity, love becomes a force that requires real strength to handle.
It becomes mighty. The text calls it so mighty a thing. Mighty implies power, sovereignty, magnitude. It's a torrential force.
This is a really important distinction, because usually when we burn out or fail at something we love, we blame the thing. We say, oh, that relationship was toxic, or that spiritual group was too intense.
Right.
But you're suggesting Aurobindo is saying the problem isn't the input. The problem is the container.
Think of it this way. Imagine you have a paper cup.
Okay.
That's the feeble nature. Now imagine you try to pour molten gold into it. That's the perfect bhakti.
The cup just disintegrates instantly.
Right. Now, is the gold bad?
No.
No. The gold is precious, it's valuable.
Yeah.
But the paper cup is the wrong vessel. It is structurally insufficient to hold that level of heat and weight.
Okay, but I have to push back a little here. Because we are culturally conditioned, especially in the West maybe, to believe that if our intention is pure, or if our feelings are sincere, that that's enough. Like, if I really love this person, or I really believe in this cause, my sincerity should protect me. Why isn't sincerity enough?
That is the great myth of romanticism. Love conquers all. Aurobindo is essentially saying no. Physics conquers all. Sincerity is just the invitation. Sincerity opens the door to the energy. You say, I am open, come on in. But once the energy is in the house, sincerity doesn't keep the floorboards from snapping.
Yeah.
Structural integrity does.
That is actually kind of terrifying. You can invite something in with a pure heart, and it can still destroy your house because the house wasn't built to code.
Exactly. In fact, your sincerity might make it worse.
How so?
Because your sincerity invites more of the impetus. You open yourself wider to the voltage, but you haven't upgraded the wires.
So we have the collision. The truck hits the bridge. The molten gold hits the paper cup. What happens next? The text describes a trajectory of failure, that is. Well, it's almost cinematic. It says, he is lifted up for a moment, then the flame soars up to heaven, leaving him behind.
Lifted up for a moment. We have to pause right there, because this explains why this whole cycle is so seductive.
It works at first.
It works beautifully. This is the honeymoon phase. This is that manic burst of productivity when you first start the company.
Right.
This is the spiritual high at the weekend retreat where everyone is crying and hugging. The energy hits you. And because you're light, because you're feeble, it picks you up effortlessly.
You feel weightless. You feel like, finally, this is it. I'm flying.
But notice the grammar there. You aren't flying. You are being lifted.
Ah, passive voice.
Passive voice. You aren't generating the power. You're being carried by the impetus. You're a leaf caught in a gust of wind. The leaf thinks it's flying, but it's just being blown.
And then comes the separation. The flame soars up to heaven, leaving him behind.
This imagery is just so stark. The flame, that mighty enthusiasm, that bhakti, it has a natural trajectory. Fire wants to go up.
It does.
It belongs to the heights. It returns to its source. It soars to heaven.
But the person.
The person is gravity bound. Unless the person has integrated with the flame, unless they become the fuel that sustains the burn, the two separate. The flame keeps going up, the person drops.
Leaving him behind. It sounds so incredibly lonely. It's that moment where the inspiration is gone, the love has evaporated, and you're just standing there in your living room, totally confused.
It's the morning after. The separation is the tragedy. You had contact with the divine or the muse or the great vision, and now it's abandoned you. But it didn't really abandon you.
It just outpaced you.
It outpaced you, exactly.
Then it doesn't just leave you back at square one. This is the part of the text that really felt like a punch in the gut. It says, leaving him behind exhausted and even weaker than before.
Even weaker than before. That is the critical warning label we talked about. This is not a zero-sum game. You do not return to baseline.
Why? Why are we weaker? Is it just the disappointment? The psychological crash of I failed again?
I don't think it's just psychological. I think we have to go back to the engineering analogy. If you run a massive power surge through a circuit that isn't rated for it, you don't just trip the breaker.
No.
You melt the wires.
Well,
you scorch the components.
So the impetus actually dealt damage to the system itself.
Exactly. Processing high-intensity energy costs biological and psychic resources. Your nervous system was redlining to hold that lifted-up state. You depleted your reserves. You stretched the elastic band until it lost its snap.
So now you're exhausted.
Exhausted implies completely drained. The vessel is empty. And weaker than before implies regression. You are now less capable of handling normal life than you were before the experience.
So you might have been bored before.
But you were functional. Now you're burnt out, you're hypersensitive, you're cynical.
This explains so much. It explains that post-project depression people talk about. It explains why people who go from one intense relationship to another seem to get more and more fragile with each breakup.
They are eroding their structural integrity. They're subjecting a feeble nature to repeated high-velocity impacts. Of course they're getting weaker.
It really challenges that old idea, it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all.
Right.
Aurobindo seems to be saying, actually, if you aren't ready for the love, it might just wreck you.
He's saying that the cost of entry for these high spiritual states is a strong vessel. Without that, the experience is destructive. It's not a moral judgment. It's just cause and effect.
Okay, so up until this point, the text has been specifically about bhakti, this spiritual devotion. And a listener might be thinking, well, I'm not a yogi, I'm not trying to reach enlightenment, so this doesn't apply to me. But then comes the second sentence, and this is where he widens the net to catch.
Well, everyone.
He certainly does, he writes, every movement of any kind. Every movement of any kind of which enthusiasm and adoration are the life. So no loopholes.
No loopholes.
Yeah.
This is what I call the universal law of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
He's saying this same dynamic applies to political revolutions, artistic movements, crypto startups, fitness journeys, marriages. Anything driven by enthusiasm and adoration.
Let's look at those two fuels. Enthusiasm and adoration. He calls them the life of the movement. And that's true, right? You can't start a movement without enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm is the spark. It's the energy that overcomes inertia. Adoration is the emotional connection. Loving the goal, loving the leader, loving the product.
Yeah.
That's what gets you out of bed at 4 in the morning. It is the life force.
But then he drops the hammer. He says these movements must fail and soon burn itself.
Must fail, not might, must.
That's the paradox I'm struggling with. If enthusiasm is the life of the movement, why does relying on it guarantee failure? How can the thing that gives it life also be the cause of death?
Because enthusiasm is a volatile fuel. It acts like high-octane gasoline. It burns incredibly hot and incredibly fast. But you cannot build a foundation out of gasoline.
You need concrete.
Exactly. If enthusiasm is the only thing keeping the structure standing, the structure is doomed. Think about a startup founder who runs purely on hype. We're going to change the world. Everyone loves us. That's the enthusiasm adoration.
But they have no business plan, no supply chain logistics, no HR policy.
They're running on vibes.
Right. They're running on vibes.
So the human material, the organizational structure is missing.
Right.
So what happens? They get lifted up for a moment, massive viral hit, huge IPO, the stock price goes to the moon.
And
then the flame soars away, the hype disconnects from reality, the enthusiasm burns out because it's finite, and the company crashes, exhausted. Weaker than before.
It's the fire festival effect. All impetus, no infrastructure.
A perfect example. And notice the text says it will soon burn itself out. This implies that enthusiasm is a finite resource. It has a half-life. You can't run an engine on the spark plugs alone. You need the steady combustion of substance.
This brings us to the root cause of all this trouble. We've talked about the flame, we've talked about the crash. Now we need to look at the culprit. The text identifies it as, so long as the human material from which it proceeds is frail and light in substance.
Human material. That is such a fascinating, almost clinical phrase. He's objectifying our nature, turning it into a substrate, like clay or metal or wood.
It takes the ego out of it. It's not you, it's your material. And he describes the problematic material as frail and light in substance. We've covered frail, that's structural weakness, but light in substance is interesting.
Light, here's the opposite of heavy. It sounds obvious, but think about the connotations in physics. Mass, gravity.
Light means easily moved, easily blown away by the wind.
Yes. It lacks gravity. It lacks gravitas. A person who is light in substance is flighty. They're the person who changes their entire worldview because they watch one YouTube video. They lack density.
So when the impetus hits them, they just don't have the mass to anchor it. They just get tossed around.
Exactly. The flame soars, and because they're light, they get dragged along like a kite in a hurricane until the string snaps. Contrast this with someone of heavy substance, someone dense.
You mean like stubborn or rigid?
Not rigid.
Yeah.
Solid. Grounded. Think of the difference between a dry leaf and a log of oak. If you put a match to a dry leaf, which is light in substance, what happens?
It flares up instantly. Whoosh! Huge flame. And then it's ash in 2 seconds.
Right. High enthusiasm, rapid burnout. The leaf couldn't bear the flame. Now put a match to a solid oak log.
It takes forever to catch. It resists. It's annoying,
It
actually.
resists. But once it catches,
It burns for hours.
it burns for hours. It gives off steady, usable heat. It sustains the flame because it has substance. It has density. It has fuel stored within its own structure.
So Aurobindo is basically telling us, don't be the leaf, be the log.
In a way, yes. The human material is the wick. If the wick is frail and light, like a cheap paper wick, the flame consumes it. If the wick is treated, dense, and prepared, it can carry the flame without being destroyed by it.
And notice the text says the movement proceeds from this material, the human material from which it proceeds. That feels important. It implies that we are the source of the limitation.
We are the bottleneck. You can have a gigabit internet connection, that's the mighty Bhakti, but if you're using a router from 1998, that's the frail human material, you are not getting that speed.
And if you try to force it.
You crash the router,
Yeah.
you smell burning plastic. The limitation isn't the signal, it's the receiver.
This forensic analysis is really painting a clear picture of a mechanism. It's like a machine. Let's try to synthesize this, connecting all the dots we've covered. We basically have a 5-step algorithm for burnout here.
Let's map it out. I like this.
Step 1, the input, the mighty impetus. This is the perfect bhakti, the massive enthusiasm, the brilliant idea, the new lover, the thing we all want.
Step 2, the processor. That's us, the human material. And in this specific failure scenario, the processor is defined as weak, feeble, frail, and light in substance.
Step 3, the reaction. The system gets energized, lifted up for a moment. The flame ignites. This is the high. This is where we think we've won.
Step 4, the failure. The load exceeds the capacity. The flame soars up to heaven. It separates from the vessel because the vessel just can't anchor it. Gravity asserts itself.
And step 5, the output. Exhaustion, regression. The vessel is left damaged, depleted, and weaker than before.
When you lay it out like that, the why of the failure becomes so obvious, doesn't it? It removes all the mystery. It's not because you didn't pray hard enough or work hard enough or wanted enough.
No, in fact, wanting it, the enthusiasm was the accelerant. The failure is structural. The text says it must fail. It's inevitable given the conditions. You can't cheat physics.
It reminds me of those people who try to run a marathon with zero training just because they feel motivated on New Year's Day.
Oh, I've been that person. I feel so inspired today. I'm going to run 10 miles.
And what happens? The impetus is the motivation. The human material is your untrained tendons and muscles. You might sprint the first mile, you're lifted up for a moment, but at mile 5,
You collapse.
you collapse. You don't just stop, you pull a hamstring. You are weaker than before. Now you can't even walk to the fridge.
Because I relied on the enthusiasm to do the work of the muscles.
Precisely. You tried to substitute intensity for capacity.
Yeah.
And the body of the material said, no.
So if the failure is inevitable given the frail material, then the implicit suggestion here, because Aurobindo doesn't explicitly say do this, he just describes the disaster, is that to succeed, the variable that needs to change is the human material.
That's the only variable we can control. We can't control the magnitude of the divine force. We can't control the nature of fire. Fire will always burn. We can only control the substance of the vessel. We have to stop being frail and light.
We have to add weight to our substance. But what does that actually mean in a practical sense? If I want to stop burning out, how do I stop being light?
It means building capacity.
Mhm.
And honestly, that is usually the boring work. It's not the flame soaring to heaven. It's the discipline. It's the daily practice when you don't feel inspired.
It's the training miles before the marathon.
Exactly. It's emotional maturity learning to sit with discomfort without reacting. It's grounding exercises. It's getting enough sleep so your nervous system isn't frayed. It's studying the business plan before you launch the IPO.
It's reinforcing the bridge before you drive the truck over it.
It's building the container. If you want to hold perfect bhakti, you need a perfect vessel, or at least a sturdy one. You need a nervous system that's wired for high voltage. You need a character that's dense enough not to be blown away by every wind of emotion.
It's the difference between chasing a high and building a life that can sustain a high.
Beautifully put. Chasing the high is easy. You just need to be light enough to be blown around. Sustaining the high, that requires mass. That requires the oak log, not the leaf.
This really reframes the spiritual path, and really the path of mastery in anything. We tend to think it's about getting higher and higher, but this suggests it's actually about getting deeper and deeper, becoming heavier.
Gravitas comes from the word gravity, weight. A master has weight. When they walk into a room, you feel it. They aren't frantic. They aren't running on hype. They're running on substance. And because of that, they can hold the flame without burning up.
This has been surprisingly heavy for just 2 sentences, but in a good way. It's a real reality check.
It is a text that demands you look in the mirror. It asks, are you building a bonfire on a wooden deck? Or are you building a hearth?
So let's wrap this up. We started with the idea of burnout, and we've realized that, according to Sri Aurobindo, burnout often comes from a mismatch between our intensity and our stability.
We learned that weak nature isn't a moral failing, but a lack of structural integrity. And that perfect bhakti, or high enthusiasm, is a force, a literal kinetic force that requires a strong container.
We saw the trajectory of the flame soaring to heaven while the human is left behind, a tragedy of separation caused by a lack of substance. And we learned that the cost of this failure is regression. We end up weaker than before.
And the relevance here is universal. Whether you're diving into a new spiritual path, starting a new career, or falling in love, you have to check your human material. Do you have the substance to back up the enthusiasm? Or are you just relying on the rush?
It's a call to build your foundation. Don't just ask for the fire, ask for the strength to carry the lantern.
Exactly.
Now, here's a thought I want to leave you with. The text describes the flame soaring to heaven while the person is left behind. It paints this picture of separation. The fire goes up, we stay down. But if we do the work, if we change our human material to be dense and strong and capable of bearing the impetus, if the vessel is strong enough, does the flame still leave us behind? Or do we finally get to go with the flame? What does it look like when the human material is actually ready to soar?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? When the weight of the vessel matches the power of the thrust. Maybe that's when we finally achieve orbit. Instead of a crash, we get flight.
Something to mull over as you build your own capacity. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.
See you next time.